Very good. You can do it on stage like that.
Alfred Brendel has passed away at the age of 94. The impact he made on the music world during his lifetime was immeasurable. He's been a constant presence and influence on me throughout my piano life, and in this video, I hope to capture something of the essence of Brendel's legacy and musical identity by sharing stories and highlights from recordings and performances that left an impression on me, my friends, and my mentors dating back 75 years. I grew up with Brendel's Beethoven, the later digital Philips recordings from the 90s, and for a period of time, I didn't really know any other way Beethoven sonatas should go. His disc of Beethoven's named sonatas were my introduction to some of the most important and famous music ever composed for piano. The Moonlight, Pathétique, Appassionata, and Les Adieux sonatas. And it was only when I got a similar disc of Emil Gilels later in high school that I had any counterpoint to Brendel's interpretations. Take Beethoven's Appassionata. Brendel projects an intensity of character and purpose right from the opening pianissimo. You can hear it in the momentum of his dotted rhythms, the electricity of the trill, and the precision of his release points. Now hear Gilels, whose conception of the opening phrase is, on the whole, more relaxed.
Beethoven always, in his sonatas, starts with the basic character at once. And this pianissimo here, misterioso as it is, has already to have some nervous tension. It should have steel inside. The indication of the nervous tension is for me the trill. This trill is not just an ornament on the surface, it indicates the higher voltage. It should be played with the greatest expression, with the greatest clarity, and without making it too soft and lyrical.
Whereas Brendel runs an electric current through both loud and soft subject matter, Gilels exploits dynamic contrast, pushing fortes towards fortissimos and pianos towards pianissimo, always within a more leisurely pulse. Notice how Gilels locates the drama in these polar dynamic extremes rather than in forward movement, stacking sounds in space without a vector. On the contrary, Brendel achieves drama not through color contrast, but through urgency of purpose. His phrasing is potent and directional, and creates a kind of kinetic energy and forward charge that's more absent from Gilels' performance.
pianissimo stays. Pianissimo. So low in the piano, you have to keep that very clear. Ram, pa, 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 pam, pa, 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 pim. Concentrate on the right hand. Here we have fortissimo, and it has to be kept. You see, these things are terribly important in Beethoven. Every single marking in this piece means something, is of vital importance.
I remember my mentors at every level of training having something or another to say about Brendel. My high school teacher in Austin, Texas, Eric Hicks, insisted I listen to Brendel's Beethoven Sonata Opus 14 No. 2 as a corrective to a rather clueless student performance we had just heard of it. Listen to how much care Brendel puts into his phrasing, he said. Listening back to how Brendel plays this opening phrase now, I'm reminded of Jed Disler's quip from a video I made a few years ago that
Alfred Brendel hovers over each phrase like a mother hen.
Brendel's phrasing here might be heard as finicky or undermining the music's natural flow, but one may also appreciate how he moves the line forward to its peak and then underlines each slur on the descent and really luxuriates at the cadence. Listen one more time and see what you think. Did you find it affectionate or just affected? It might depend on your current mood or your prior expectations for this piece. Keep in mind that this was Brendel's third complete recorded cycle of the Beethoven sonatas and the umpteenth time he'd played this particular sonata. And often a great artist becomes even more sensitive to the details of a work as they've lived with it for a long time. So if you're looking for a more streamlined phrase, you could simply turn to Brendel's first recording of the sonata made over 30 years earlier for Vox. When I was in college, I distinctly remember my teacher Bobby Rue pointing out that what separated Brendel from other pianists was how deliberate he was in signaling phrase endings and marking transitions in music from especially the classical style. On the flip side, Brendel's skill for delineating phrases and underlining motivic cells could come across as mannered. This is true of any artist who forges their own path. Taking a left turn means you can't turn right, and you shouldn't try to straddle both paths at once. By committing to a point of view in art, you have to reject some other viable perspective. Brendel played with a high degree of formal awareness and phraseology. It's earthbound and logical, and therefore it can't be celestial and mysterious. My high school teacher once told me a story about his teacher, the late John Perry, who heard Brendel play Schubert's F minor musical moment in Vienna in the 1970s. While he admired Brendel, Perry was apparently disappointed that Brendel didn't change color more when the music turns to A-flat. There's an integrity and consistency to the sound world he's constructed that disallows abrupt color changes of the kind employed by, say, Vladimir Horowitz. The sheer volume of Brendel's recorded output is overwhelming, even for a dedicated aficionado. The repetitions in Brendel's discography were probably more a product of the heyday of the recording industry than across-the-board updates in Brendel's conception of the 32 Beethoven sonatas and other re-recorded works. Nevertheless, Brendel's voracious appetite for learning, performing, and revisiting the complete standard works of the whole Austro-German canon seems to have developed at an early age, well before he was ever contracted to record a complete cycle. Young Brendel seems to have had incredible autonomy and willpower, having been largely self-motivated and self-taught in his late teens and early 20s, with the exception of a couple brief encounters with high-profile mentors like Edwin Fischer and Eduard Steuermann. One of my grad school teachers, Jerry Lowenthal, had also studied with Steuermann in the 1950s, and remembers Steuermann telling a story about the 3 lessons he had given Brendel at the Salzburg Festival. For the first lesson, Brendel brought Beethoven's Sonata Opus 111. Steuermann was pleased and expected to spend multiple lessons teaching this rich and detailed work. But in their next meeting, Brendel showed up with the Liszt Sonata, much to Steuermann's surprise. Then, in lesson number 3, Brendel came in and played the Hammerklavier. Steuermann was at a loss. Coming of age in the early post-war period, Brendel was determined to prove his prowess at the keyboard, and not only in the works of the Austro-German tradition. For his debut recording, he played, of all things, Prokofiev's Piano Concerto No. 5. And his first solo LP also leaned on his Slavic roots. Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition, Stravinsky's 3 movements from Petrushka, and Balakirev's Islame. All knuckle-busting repertoire not typically associated with a pianist who ended up pitching his tent in the Viennese classics. Nor was it common for specialists of Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven to also champion the music of Franz Liszt, who was for a long time put down by purists as a composer of shallow showpieces. Brendel confronted these stereotypes in his essay Liszt Misunderstood, writing, "It is a peculiarity of Liszt's music that it faithfully and fatefully mirrors the character of its interpreter. When his works give the impression of being hollow, superficial, and pretentious, the fault usually lies with the performer, occasionally with the prejudiced listener, and only rarely with Liszt himself." Brendel's Liszt is a tour de force of motivic unity and dramatic cohesion in the Beethovenian tradition, with plenty of technique to boot.
arpeggio. This is thematic. Every note. Ti ba-da-da-dam, ti di-a-di-a-di-a-di-a-dim. Martellato. Very good written, like an orchestra.
Brendel has been called cerebral and a thinking pianist's man, the implication being that it's unusual for musicians to use their brains. And it is true that Brendel was in a minority of great concert pianists who also published essays and delved into the world of culture and ideas beyond music. Yet he never put his head over his heart. In his own words, quote, "Although I find it necessary and refreshing to think about music, I'm always conscious of the fact that feeling must remain the alpha and omega of a musician. Indeed, when listening to Brendel's Beethoven, you can hear reason and emotion working together." In his essay, Form and Psychology in Beethoven's Piano Sonatas, Brendel coins the term foreshortening to describe a characteristic technique Beethoven uses to give his music an inexorable forward drive. But Brendel doesn't just say it, he does it. Foreshortening is one of the key features in Beethoven's compositional blueprints. It's part of the architecture of his music, as opposed to Schubert's habit of sleepwalking through his sonatas, in Brendel's famous formulation, found later in the same essay. I was very fortunate to interview Brendel twice for the Juilliard Journal, once in 2009, shortly after he retired from the stage, and then again in 2011 when he was visiting to give masterclasses. The first was over email, but the second time, I was tasked with picking Brendel up in Midtown Manhattan and hailing a cab for the two of us to ride in together to the Upper West Side. It was surreal to find this towering figure emerge from the crowd in a hotel lobby, having only ever seen him sitting at his instrument or posing for album covers. I asked Brendel how his generalizations about Beethoven the architect and Schubert the sleepwalker showed up in his own interpretations of their music, and he hastened to point out that one shouldn't impose these ideas on specific pieces of music. Beethoven at times could dream or rave, while Schubert could be the logical master craftsman. Truly great composers defy pigeonholing, he said. For Brendel, every masterpiece projects a definite character found in both its minute details and the music's larger unfolding. A musical composition is a landscape of psychological and moral ideals, and there's a kind of imperative for the interpreter to articulate and make sense of the particular humane qualities in the work. So, just as Beethoven might be described as the great humanist composer, Brendel might be thought of as the great humanist pianist. His sound is rarely ethereal. It's down-to-earth, sanguine, and life-affirming. His playing can be fiery, it can be sad, it can be funny. He's serious and purposeful in one instant, but then he laughs at the absurdity of it all in the next. Alfred Brendel revealed the full potential of our collective personality, and that made him larger than life. He will be missed, but his music will play on for generations to come.